In the grand, gilded theater of the British monarchy, succession is everything. It's a line of duty, destiny, and power that stretches back 1,000 years. But sometimes, history throws a wrench in the works. Sometimes, a tragedy becomes the spark for a completely new chapter, rewriting the fate of not just a family, but an entire empire. She was all set to marry the heir to the British throne, destined to be queen. But when that tragedy struck, Princess Mary of Teck was faced with an unheard-of proposal: marry her late fiancé's younger brother. This is the story of how a marriage of duty, born from a deep sense of royal responsibility, became one of the most enduring and influential love stories the modern monarchy has ever seen. This wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was a union forged in grief and constitutional necessity, a partnership that began under the watchful eye of a queen empress who was determined to secure her dynasty. What nobody could have predicted was that this arranged marriage between the reserved, intellectual princess and the quiet, dutiful second son would blossom into a bond of profound love and respect. Together, they would navigate some of the most turbulent decades in modern history, steer the monarchy through a world war that wiped empires off the map, and fundamentally change what it meant to be royal in a new, uncertain age. This is the incredible story of Queen Mary and King George V, the couple who saved the crown. To understand the impossible situation Mary and George found themselves in, we have to go back to the twilight years of the 19th century. Queen Victoria, the formidable matriarch of Europe, sat on the throne of a global empire. Her long reign had defined an era, but as she entered her final decade, the future weighed heavily on the nation. Her son, the pleasure-loving Bertie, Prince of Wales, was the heir. But the real future rested with his eldest son, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale. Known to his family as Eddie, he was second in line to the throne and, by all accounts, a charming and handsome young man. Behind the scenes, though, there were whispers of concern. Born 2 months premature, Eddie was often described as languid and apathetic, with little interest in intellectual pursuits. His tutors despaired, and even his father grew frustrated with his perceived shortcomings. Rumors swirled about his private life, linking him to scandals that threatened the monarchy's carefully polished image. Whether these whispers were true or not, the consensus was clear. Eddie just wasn't cut out for the immense task of being king-emperor. The solution, as it so often was in royal circles, was a carefully chosen wife. A strong, stable, and unimpeachably proper woman could, they hoped, anchor the wayward prince and secure the succession. The candidate selected by Queen Victoria herself was a young woman of impeccable royal lineage but modest means, Princess Victoria Mary of Teck. Known as May to her family, she was born in Kensington Palace to a German duke and a British princess. Her family's finances were often shaky thanks to her mother's extravagance, which even forced them to live abroad for a time to save money. Despite this, May was raised with an unshakable sense of duty and reverence for the monarchy. She was intelligent, reserved, and had a quiet strength that greatly impressed Queen Victoria. In short, she was the perfect candidate for a future queen consort. In December 1891, Prince Eddie proposed, and May accepted. It was a practical match. For May, it secured her future. For the royal family, it promised stability. The public cheered, and wedding preparations began. But just 6 weeks after the engagement was announced, disaster struck. In January 1892, during a global influenza pandemic, Prince Albert Victor fell gravely ill at Sandringham House. With his fiancée, Princess May, nursing him at his bedside, the heir presumptive to the British throne died. He was just 28 years old. The nation was plunged into mourning. The line of succession, once so secure, was suddenly in disarray. And at the heart of this tragedy was Princess May, now left in a deeply awkward and uncertain position. She was the woman who was almost queen, betrothed to the dead heir and now tied to a family consumed by grief. Queen Victoria's carefully laid plans had been shattered. The death of Prince Eddie created a vacuum. Suddenly, all eyes turned to his younger brother, Prince George. Born in 1865, George was never supposed to be king. As the second son, he was destined for a career in the Royal Navy, a life he adored for its structure, discipline, and relative freedom from the spotlight. Unlike his brother, George wasn't known for his charisma. He was quiet, serious, and deeply conservative. His worldview was shaped on the deck of a warship, not in the drawing rooms of London. He was a dedicated stamp collector, a crack shot, and a man who valued routine and duty above all else. In their shared period of mourning for Eddie, George and May were thrown together. They grieved for the same man, a brother to one, a fiancé to the other. Queen Victoria, ever the pragmatist, saw an opportunity. She was fond of May, believing she had the perfect temperament for a future queen, and saw no reason that should change just because the groom had. The idea was floated. George, the new heir, should marry May, his brother's intended bride. The situation was, to put it mildly, awkward. The press began to speculate wildly, and public expectation grew. May was still in deep mourning, and George, having once been rejected by another potential bride, was hesitant. He had written that he could never marry someone who didn't love him, as it would make him unhappy forever. Yet the pressure of duty, from the Queen and the country, was immense. Encouraged by his family, George finally pushed past the awkwardness. On April 29, 1893, in the garden of his sister's home, George proposed to May beside a pond. She accepted, and their engagement was announced on May 3rd. 2 months later, on July 6, 1893, they were married in the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace. What began as an arranged marriage born from tragedy slowly began to transform. George and May were, at their core, very similar. They shared a profound sense of duty, a deep love for Britain, and a preference for a quiet, ordered home life. They were granted York Cottage on the Sandringham estate, a relatively modest home where they would live for much of the next 3 decades. It was here, away from the constant scrutiny of London, that their bond truly deepened. George, unlike his father, was utterly devoted to his wife and never took a mistress. He wrote to her every single day they were apart, and their letters show a relationship that quickly grew into one of genuine love and trust. They had 6 children: Edward, known as David; Albert, known as Bertie; Mary, Henry, George, and John. By all accounts, their parenting style was a product of their time. George could be a strict father, and Mary often seemed formal and reserved with her children, which led to difficult relationships, especially with her eldest son. Their youngest, Prince John, suffered from severe epilepsy and was largely kept from the public eye, living separately on the Sandringham estate until his death at age 13. Yet, through it all, the partnership between George and May was the unshakable bedrock of their world. In 1901, Queen Victoria died, and George's father became King Edward VII. George was now the Prince of Wales, and he and May took on more public duties, extensively touring the British Empire. Then, in May 1910, King Edward VII died. The quiet sailor who was never meant to rule was now King George V, and his once bereaved fiancée was his Queen Mary. They had no idea their reign would soon collide with one of the greatest cataclysms the world had ever seen. The story of how this dutiful couple faced the storm of global conflict is a testament to their strength. They would have to not only guide their nation through the fire, but completely reinvent the monarchy to ensure it survived. If you're enjoying this journey into royal history, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion to their story. When King George V and Queen Mary took the throne, the world was a tapestry of empires, many ruled by their own relatives. The German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, was George's first cousin. The Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, was also his first cousin. In fact, they looked so much alike they were often mistaken for each other. But this web of European royalty was about to be torn apart by the First World War in 1914. The war was the defining event of their reign, and they met the moment with a tireless dedication that cemented their place in the nation's heart. This wasn't a monarchy that hid behind palace walls. George V made numerous visits to the Western Front, meeting troops and sharing the dangers of life in the trenches. During one such visit in 1915, he was seriously injured when his horse reared and fell on him, breaking his pelvis, an injury that left him in pain for the rest of his life. Queen Mary was his equal in her commitment. She threw herself into projects on the home front, becoming a familiar, comforting presence. She started austerity measures at Buckingham Palace, rationing food just like ordinary families. She visited factories and shipyards to boost morale and spent countless hours in hospitals, visiting wounded soldiers and consoling the families of the dead. Her quiet, steadfast empathy was a pillar of support for a grieving nation. Their visible, relentless work showed that the monarchy shared in the sacrifice, which helped maintain its popularity during a time of immense upheaval. One of their most significant acts came in 1917. With anti-German sentiment at a fever pitch, the king made a radical decision. He renounced all of his family's German titles and changed the name of the royal house from the German-sounding Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the quintessentially English House of Windsor. It was a brilliant PR move that aligned the monarchy squarely with its people, severing the last ties to the enemy. This single decision helped save the British crown when other European dynasties, including those of their cousins in Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary, were crumbling into dust. After the war, George and Mary continued to modernize the monarchy. They understood that in a new, more democratic age, royalty couldn't afford to be distant. They became more accessible to the public, reaching out to leaders of the Labor Party and the working classes to foster a more inclusive image. Queen Mary cultivated an instantly recognizable public persona with her signature hats and formal gowns, understanding the power of a steady image. And they embraced new technology, with King George starting the annual Royal Christmas broadcast in 1932, using the radio to speak directly to his people. Through their combined efforts, they presented the royal family as the stable, family-oriented heart of the nation. Their personal love story, which began so awkwardly, had by now deepened into a profound partnership. Towards the end of his life, while preparing a speech, King George told his secretary to put the paragraph about the Queen at the very end, confessing, "I can't trust myself to speak of the Queen when I think of all I owe her." King George V's health, strained by the war and a lifetime of service, began to fail in his later years. He died on January 20th, 1936, with his devoted Mary at his side. For Queen Mary, the loss was immense, but her service to the crown was not over. In fact, she was about to face the greatest challenge of her life. Her eldest son, David, ascended the throne as King Edward VIII. But his reign was immediately thrown into turmoil by his determination to marry Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American socialite. In the 1930s, this was a constitutional crisis. The king, as head of the Church of England, could not marry a divorcee whose ex-husbands were still alive. The government and the public found Simpson an unacceptable choice for Queen. Throughout this agonizing period, Queen Mary was a pillar of tradition and duty. While she loved her son, she was resolute in her disapproval of his actions, which she saw as a betrayal of his sacred duty. The crisis deepened, and Edward was forced to choose the woman he loved or the throne. In December 1936, after less than a year as king, he chose to abdicate. The monarchy was shaken to its core. In this moment of crisis, it was Queen Mary who provided the crucial stabilizing force. She threw her full support behind her second son, the shy, stammering Albert, or Bertie, who had never wanted to be king. He took the throne as King George VI, deliberately choosing his father's name to signify a return to the dutiful values his parents had embodied. Queen Mary became the first British Dowager Queen to attend the coronation of her successor, a powerful public display of support that helped restore public confidence. Queen Mary lived on for another 17 years, a respected and formidable matriarch. She provided moral support to King George VI and Queen Elizabeth during the trials of World War II, and took a keen interest in the upbringing of her granddaughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. She lived just long enough to see her granddaughter ascend the throne as Queen Elizabeth II, passing away just before the coronation in 1953. The love story of Queen Mary and King George V isn't one of whirlwind passion. It's a story of something perhaps more profound. It's about how two people bound together by fate built a partnership on shared values, mutual respect, and an unshakable commitment to duty. They began their life together in the shadow of a personal tragedy, yet their union became the anchor that steadied the monarchy through the stormiest of seas. They found love not in a grand gesture, but in the quiet reality of a shared life and a common purpose. They inherited a 19th-century monarchy and successfully reinvented it for the 20th, ensuring its survival when so many other crowns were lost. Their legacy isn't just in the line of succession that continues today, but in the very model of the modern British monarchy they created, one based on public service, personal sacrifice, and a deep, abiding connection with the people. Theirs was a romance written not just in love letters, but in the annals of history, a testament to how a marriage of duty became a partnership that saved the crown. What do you think is the most important legacy of King George V and Queen Mary? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the lives that shaped our world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.